Cheers from the beers. Sheffield wife of Paul Beer claims he does not take enough exercise while drinking too heavily. Paul has countered his wife's allegations by setting up a swimming pool in his garden. Paul's wife Pauline Beer, horrified by the cost of Paul's swimming pool, demanded the outdoor shower she had always dreamed of. Anxious to keep the peace, Paul duly had one installed. Paul's American cousin Bud Light heard about Paul's new pool and decided to show the family his new theme park, so invited him to his Florida ranch. Of the family members who were able to attend, Paul and Pauline, Geordie and Geordette Brown from Newcastle, and Paolo and Rose Vino from Milan all enjoyed riding the bottle flume. Paul and Pauline can be seen in the nearest car. Bruce Foster, Bud and Paul's cousin from Brisbane, Australia, enjoyed cooking on the barbecue while catching up on old times with Bud. Bruce's wife Sheila fell victim to one of Paul's brother-in-law Larry Lager from Birmingham's practical jokes when he threw her hat onto the top of a lamp post. Sheila took this in good spirits, although Larry's wife Paula, who was enjoying a dip in the pool at the time with Bourbon Light and her grown-up daughter Soda, was absolutely furious at her husband's behavior. Pauline and Paula's unmarried sister Paulette Cider always enjoyed her trips to the States because she got to borrow Soda's top-of-the-range rollerblades, which were far better than the ones her boyfriend Johnny Walker had bought her for last Christmas. The family always enjoyed Christmas at the Beers. The only downside of the day was Paul showing his slides after Christmas dinner. Johnny Walker and Paulette Cider were too polite to say anything. Most of the other guests left the room apart from Larry Lager, who insisted on doing his light ale jokes even though these had been seen many times before. Paul's long-suffering wife Pauline pleaded with Jordi Brown to switch off the projector. Jordi refused as he was enjoying the show so much. Pauline decided to leave the room to help Geordette and Paula with the dinner pots and watch the Christmas edition of EastEnders on the portable TV before any more slides were shown. Now perhaps you can see why Pauline left the room. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, as Geordette finished off the washing up, Pauline offered Paula another beer, to which she said yes, but whatever you do, don't let Larry see that BBC logo on the telly or we will never hear the end of his Beers Broadcasting Company jokes. Geordette also accepted Pauline's offer of a beer, but Geordie and the lads were so engrossed in the slideshow they didn't hear Pauline ask them. After enjoying Christmas at the Beers, Geordie and Geordette always invited Paul and Pauline up to Newcastle for a New Year's Day barbecue. This year, as Geordie thought the weather was much better, he decided to hold it on the beach at Whitley Bay, a favourite spot of keen swimmer Geordette. Geordie's brother Roy Brown also attended the barbecue. The others had joked he was becoming a chubby Brown, so he went for a swim. Meanwhile, Mike Mead from Lindisfarne was arriving on his speedboat, as he had also been invited by Geordie. As Paul warms his hands over the barbecue and discusses the highlights of his Christmas slideshow with Geordie, Geordette pops out of the water to see if any food is ready. Meanwhile, Pauline, huddled up in her big coat under the umbrella, cannot believe they are having a barbecue on the beach in the middle of winter. Paul's teetotal brother Ginger Beer paid Paul a visit the summer after the pool was installed. He was complaining to Paul that his friend could not swim in the pool because he was teetotal, whereas Paulette's boyfriend Johnny Walker could because he enjoyed his beer. Meanwhile, ever the joker Larry Lager removed the ladder to stop Johnny from leaving the pool and joked to Paul he had a whiskey chaser stuck in his pint. Paul was getting fed up and wished they would all get out of his way so he could cut the lawn ready for the arrival of the Light family, who were flying in from the States to visit the British relatives. Bud always insisted on a low fly past of Paul's house in Bud Force 1 on his way into the airport, much to the annoyance of Paul's neighbors. Larry was always telling Paul not to leave his landing light on or Bud may land on his house. While Paul was mowing the lawn, Pauline, Paula, Geordette and Geordie had gone to meet the lights at the airport. As Bud taxied in, Geordie and Geordette went to prepare the steps for the lights to disembark from the aircraft. Larry had told Paula there would be lots of landing lights when she got to the airport. Paula was most surprised when only 3 people got off the plane. Where are the rest of them? She asked Pauline. Pauline explained the lights on the runway were known as landing lights and Larry was having a joke with her. During Bud's visit, the family had an outing to Llandudno, North Wales, as Bud always enjoyed a drink in the bar at the end of the pier. As Bud and Paul headed for the bar to join the others, Paulette stayed behind to watch Johnny and Soda lark about with the giant inflatable beer bottle Bud brought as a present for her and Johnny. She declined to go in the water because her clothes were brand new. As Bud and Paul walked away, they thought Paulette was having a giggle at the antics of the pair in the water, but in fact she couldn't help having a laugh at the shirt Paul was wearing, another gift from Bud. On his visit, Bud takes the family on a camping trip to his favourite UK watering hole, the Tan Hill Inn in North Yorkshire, Britain's highest pub. Bud had made the unfortunate mistake of driving his limousine onto the soft ground near the tent and got it stuck. Fortunately, Paul was able to use his old trusty Land Rover to rescue the limo. Ginger Beer steered the car while Larry Lager pushed. Ginger could not resist Paul's invitation to visit Camp Bud in North Yorkshire. As Bud, Geordie and Soda prepared some food on the barbecue, Paula and Paulette prepare the tent for the meal. Geordette, Pauline and Bourbon arrive with some beer in Larry's pickup. Larry tells them not to try and drive up to the tent but to wait for Paul to ferry their load in his Land Rover when he has finished rescuing the limo, and then joked, "I don't want my van stretching like Bud's car, it was only a Mini when we started." Pauline moaned to the others, "Paul will never get rid of that old heap after this. I keep asking him to change it for a real car but he keeps coming up with excuses." Bourbon replies to Pauline, "I wish an old Land Rover was the only embarrassing thing my husband owned, just take a look at that tent." Larry and Jordi take a trip to France on a booze cruise. Before they do their shopping, they pay a visit to Paul's snooty French cousin Jean-Paul Champagne. Larry had heard Jean-Paul needed some new gate posts, so took him some as a gift thinking they would look perfect, only to find Jean-Paul has already had some installed. Larry's suggestion of cracking open the gate posts and having a drink and then replacing them with his own met with a frosty response from Jean-Paul, who tells them to take the monstrosities away and never bring them back. Jordi then says he knew they should have brought Newcastle brown ale bottles instead. After picking the booze in France, Larry and Jordi realized they had forgotten to buy return tickets on the ferry, and because they had spent so much money they hadn't enough to buy any. Jordi had a brainwave and they decided to use the gateposts they had brought for Jean-Paul as floats so they could sail Larry's van back home. Jordi invites the family up to Newcastle to see his recently restored Ford Cortina MK3. Paul and Pauline, along with Larry and Paula Lager, and Paul's sister Beatrix Beer, are able to attend. As Jordi and Beatrix discuss Ford Cortinas, Paula and Geordette are far more interested in Geordette's Audi TT convertible. Paula asks Geordette if Larry was right when he said TT stood for Top Totty. Paul, who has no interest in any of the cars, places a model of Johnny Walker in Geordie's beer feature. He says no beer feature would be complete without Johnny. While at the pond, he has been admiring Geordie's model of the Tuxedo Princess nightclub moored under the Mini Tyne Bridge. Larry jokes to Pauline that Paul is coming back because they would not let him into the nightclub in such a ridiculous shirt. This was a happy year for the Siders. Paulette and Johnny announced their engagement. A great engagement party was held at the Sider household near Knutsford. As the family started to arrive for the event, Jordi chatted to Sid Sider, Paulette's father, about the quality of apples for cider making in the Newcastle area. Paul made his way to the house to see Pauline, who was already upstairs settling into their room. Beatrix and Geordette chatted about cars before heading into the house to help Paula and her mother Cindy Sider with preparations for the party. Larry Lager jokes to Johnny that he was going to ring him but didn't bother because he'd heard he was engaged. Johnny was enjoying a dip in the Siders pool in the new Flagon extension but had broken off to chat with Paulette. Larry's sister Sue Fiddick and her husband Glenn have arrived at the Lager household with the son Malt for his 12th birthday party. While Paula comes out to meet the visitors, Larry is up the ladder finishing off the last of the decorations. Glenn heads off to help Larry, while Sue asks Paula to come and help coax Malt out of the car. He is refusing to get out as he knows he is going to be embarrassed by Uncle Larry's jokes about him being a 12-year-old single malt. Meanwhile, grumpy neighbor Cedric Stout is angrily complaining about the decorations spoiling the tone of the neighborhood and cars parking on the grass. Larry tells the guests to ignore him because he has done nothing but moan since he built the Tudor extension. To which Paula says it didn't help when you asked him for design ideas, claiming he should be able to remember the Tudor period from his childhood.